Good morning. It is Good Friday, April 4th, I do believe, or 3rd, something like that. In any case, welcome to One Poem by Lee County Pod. Our host today, Pete Malignick, will be guiding us through a rather lengthy poem in which we'll be reading excerpts from, as opposed to the whole poem because it is long. It is Desert Drift by Alice Corbin. Pete, would you go ahead and introduce us to this poem?
Thank you, Jack. This poem was featured in a book by the author that came out in about 1920. So, from well over 100 years ago. Alice Corbin was an associate editor with Poetry Magazine at the time when its founder, Harriet Monroe, was very active, and that poem coming out of Chicago. And I believe Corbin herself moved from the Chicago area out to the Southwest, specifically the area around Santa Fe and Taos, New Mexico. And one reason she moved was for health purposes. I think she had tuberculosis. And I think of another famous writer who did something similar, D.H. Lawrence. I think he had tuberculosis and moved out for a while to the area around Taos, New Mexico for his health. So Alice Corbin, her poem being very much grounded in the natural landscape, a sequence of 17 poems, and let's say, as Jack put it the other day when we were looking at the poem, grounded in the reality of the natural world. It would not be inaccurate to call this a landscape poem. And as in similar poems, the way that Corbin describes the landscape reflects some psychological, emotional state of mind. 17 sections in all, varied in length. All of them are relatively short, though. But the first one, titled Spring, really emphasizes fertility, greenery. Spring has come to the apricot boughs, the cottonwoods fringe green on the branches, and she's got, after that, a water image of floodgates and streams, of the snow melting on the mountain peaks and coming down into the valley. Now, what's interesting is that immediately after the first part, Spring, there's a part called Dust Whirl. It's fairly short. The wind picks up a handful of dust and sets it down. Faint spiral of lives lived long ago on the desert. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. She has the 4 lines here. The first 2 present a picture, and the second 2 give a comment on that picture, and reflecting back to times long past, maybe you could even say ancient times, and maybe giving the poem, initiating a spiritual dimension to this poem, which is sustained as we get into it.
I think I tend to agree that throughout the vignettes that we're presented with in this poem, there is that allusion and that call to the mystical, the spiritual. And I think she really captures New Mexico. New Mexico has such a varied terrain, varied climate. I mean, we get, on average about 300 days of sunlight a year, but we also have violent storms. I think the contrast between spring and dust whirl, you start with spring where you have life just flowing through. Everything's becoming green, water is flowing, and there's life. When you get to dust whirl, which is the second vignette, you have this image of dry bones, dust, desert. The wind picks up the dust and scatters it like it was scattering the ground bones of dinosaurs, for example. It's this idea that there's this change in environment, this change in the substance of the world, so to speak. It's an observation, yes. It's mystical, yes. But it also speaks very true to the landscape in which we live in here in New Mexico, which one moment you can have green grass all over the place, and then 2 or 3 weeks later everything is brown and dried up and tenderized so that a spark can set a fire. I find that unique, that she's very attuned to the nature of the landscape.
Yeah, and along with that, she says the desert here, and specifically it's called a high desert.
Yes.
A little bit similar to what you might find in the extreme part of West Texas in the Big Bend area, yet a little bit different too. The mountains in northern New Mexico, and thinking of the centrality of landscape in here, one significant word is canyon. In the 5th part of the poem, the tired wind creeps down the canyon at nightfall. By day it turns and flings itself against the granite face of the mountains. That word canyon really takes on significance in this sequential poem, and here again, the wind repeated that first appeared in part 2. In part 7, okay, this is, here it is. There is an inverted word order. So will I wait. It's called waiting. More still than death that waits 1,000 years in a new plowed field of upturned bones. So will I wait for you 1,000 years. And it could be a love poem. It has that tone to it. Yet it could be something else, something that borders on mysticism, even too. It's open-ended that way. Yet, as said, it could be by its tone a love poem.
I think that particular vignette points to the element of connection, that not only are we connected to people, but we're also connected to the landscape. We're connected to this world. We have to move through the physical reality of this world. We have to move through what is real. And then there's this connection that you could characterize, an eternal perspective that, yet, so will I wait 1,000 years. If I can live 1,000 years, I want this relationship to continue, and I'll wait, if necessary, for however long for the relationship to bear fruit. Again, it falls into the mystical sense and uses the landscape as the anchor for it, I think.
Yeah, well said, Jack, and that seems to be true in the eighth part, afternoon. It's simply titled "Earth Tips to the West and the Hills Lean Backward." Giving that animation to the landscape, cedar trees hugging the hillsides, smoke drifts in the valley, the pinto sun nickers over the gate of the home corral. Interesting word choice there, the pinto sun.
Yeah.
Where I'm thinking more of a horse again.
Yes.
She has the third part of her poem is called subtitled "Trees and Horses."
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting one. The ninth segment, cactus. The cactus scrawls crude hieroglyphics against the sky. It reaches with twisted, inquisitive fingers to clutch the throat of something and question why.
Mm-hmm.
If I can hold this up so people can see, she's got some indention in there. With the Y capitalized. We talked about this, Jack, and I think what she may be referring to here, as you had said, is a Lachola cactus.
Yes.
The poet's description is actually pretty accurate to the form of that tree, that cactus tree.
Yeah.
Too. And they are found in northern New Mexico, also, I think, in West Texas.
Yes.
To clutch the throat of something, see, there's that ambiguity again, just like the U in Section 7, so will I wait for you 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
She never gets more specific. Never gets more specific than the indefinite pronoun something here, to clutch the throat of something and question why. But interesting. Let's see, that's 8. I think it's 10 is probably my favorite out of all 17 of them. It's called Stone, Pine, and Stream. I'll hold it up. People can briefly see that subtitle and the text below it. The stone pine with green branches stands on the brink of the canyon. The wind whispers in the tree. The wind lifts my hair. Water runs with a pattern of braided and woven music through the stream in the canyon. My body flows like water through the stream in the canyon. There you've got that repetition of stream in the canyon.
Yes.
And also coming after the repetition of wind I feel the weakest line in the poem is line 3, the wind whispers in the tree, yet it sets us up for the wind lifts my hair. And I like that. It's it's really the only image in the 17th section poem where the eye appears in an animated way. I believe.
The personal observation or the personal experience of the narrator becoming real. Alluding to transformation within the natural realm. Again, it's the wind is whispering. The wind is talking to you. I think we have all had this experience in which we're out in the middle of nowhere. At least most of us have had the experience of being out in the middle of nowhere. The wind is blowing, and everything else is silent, except for the wind going through the trees or blowing through the grass. And it's almost as if the wind is speaking. And you find that whether you want to or not, the wind is interacting with you. The wind is moving you, however slightly, whether it's blowing your hair or blowing your clothes, rustling your clothes, whatever. The wind is a part of the conversation at this point.
And what's interesting too is the poem begins with a tree and water image, and then the second part is just the wind. There's no water in there, but in part 10 here, there's a fusion of wind and water.
Yes.
The wind lifts my hair, water runs with a pattern of braided and woven music through the stream in the canyon. I like that image a lot. I was looking through some journal submission guidelines yesterday, and the editors of this particular journal said we want poems that make us feel good, and that certainly is an image that could make me feel good. Water runs with a pattern of braided and woven music through the stream in the canyon. And just like in section 9, Corbin indented 2 single words here.
Yes.
Music and this time music and canyon. And a follow-up to part 9, subtitled Cactus, which ends with question why. We have the poem Shadow, a segment Shadow, a poem within the poem. A deep blue shadow falls on the face of the mountain. What great bird's wing has dropped a feather? One of the shortest segments in the poem, but it says a lot. There's a lot of space to move in these 4 lines that end with a question.
Yeah.
One could say, the familiar saying really is poetry is a lot more about questions than answers. But I like that one for the suggestive power of the image.
Right.
Using few words to say a lot. I guess, it's somewhat of a minimalist poem. What else do we have here? Quite a bit. After 12, we come to 13, a religious element that's sustained into part 14. Night. The night is dark and the moon moves heavily, dragging a cross. Penitent peaks drip, crowned with cactus. The wind whips itself mournfully through the arroyos. Yeah, when you look at her word choice there, cross, penitent, even crowned, it takes on a religious aspect that is sustained in descanso. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
That may be a Spanish word.
Yes.
She has several in this poem. But beside the wooden cross, by the cross of the desert cactus, the coffin bearers rested. Pray for the soul of Manuel Rodriguez, and remember that death is the end of life. I found that to be interesting because what one might expect to hear is that death is not the end of life. And why one would expect to hear that is because of the diction. Again, with the cross, pray for the soul, and the religious elements in the poem that preceded it, night. So, yeah, and remember that death is the end of life. You know, that finality came to me as a surprise.
Yeah.
Anything else to say about that, Jack?
I think this little vignette deals with the very real human experience of death. Because in our human experience, death is a reality. We see things die. Most everybody at some point in their time will have a personal experience with someone or something dying. And from a purely human perspective, without dressing it up, death is final. There's no coming back from just a pure sense. Now we can drop down into the metaphysical, we can drop down into the spiritual and talk about that all day long, but that doesn't change the observation that there is a body in the coffin. It doesn't change the fact that there's a body in the coffin and that body's not getting up and walking away. That body's going to be buried in the ground, in the box, in the coffin. And for all of our observations, death is final. And I think Corbin hits this hard with this vignette, not in a mean way or in a cruel way. It's the reality that we in ourselves cannot change our fate.
And it's a poem of burial. The coffin bearers, and there are no other mourners depicted, but someone says, because it's in quotation marks, pray for the soul. They are going to leave, but the deceased, the body of the deceased is going into the ground.
Right.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
So,
we talked about, as we were looking at this poem the other day, we talked about the tactile images and the auditory images.
Yes.
And Pueblo, I think, is rich in both of them. there again, a word, I don't think that was originally in English, Pueblo. Spanish?
Spanish.
Okay. The Pueblo rises under the sun-bronzed noon as if hammered out of copper. The sky's metallic blue rings in the silence. Nothing moves but the shapes that strain without changing. That strain without changing. Interesting word choice there.
Yes.
But you have the synesthesia of the sky. The sky's blue, you know, the visual accented there, ringing in the silence. It rings in the silence. That's what's called when you have a mixture of the five senses, synesthesia.
Right, and no, the idea is that the within this particular little vignette, the scene, the sky dominates. The sky dominates over the building. And even though there's nothing moving, the shape of the building, it's almost as if something is trying to change the nature of the landscape, if you will.
You know, and here again we got somewhat of a panoramic view.
Yes.
The person seeing the Pueblo seems to be seeing it from afar, and the impression nothing moves but the shapes that strain.
Yeah, it's like it's like the sky is pulling. No, and sometimes you can get that sense if you're on a hillside or a mountainside, and you're looking out across the distance, and sometimes it seems, like I say, in New Mexico the sky dominates. We have, generally speaking, clear vistas. We have long sight lines. We can see for a long ways, typically, nominally speaking. When you get up in northern New Mexico, when you get up in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and so on and so forth, your sight lines decrease somewhat because you experience the canyons and the valleys and you're driving through the mountains. But here on the plains, you have long sight lines. You can see for 2 or 3 miles, and it's an uninterrupted view typically, unless you have your telephone poles, you have solitary farms, things like that. I think with this particular piece, the idea that the sky is pulling the Pueblo, trying to change its shape, trying to change its nature, and that's where you get the strain. It's the idea that some things resist that change. Again, I would say that this is sort of a segment that tries to ground the reader, if you will, this pull between the mystical and the hard reality of existence.
As if hammered out of copper. And
right.
That's such a nice touch there. There's so many nice flourishes in this poem. That to me is one of them.
Yes, I agree.
And once again, questions with section 16. Who is this running with me? Whose shadow alone I see? And that rhyme is sustained, the end rhyme in line 3, and at high noon hear only the soft tread of his sandals. There again, giving that mystical element of things. You could even say, it's without resolution because line 3, although lines 1 and 2 rhyme, lines 3 and 4 do not. And once again, that sound image, the soft tread of sandals, sound as well as sight. And here only the soft tread of his sandals. And the poem is subtitled Double. Interesting. Once again, there's some ambiguity, just as in the inquisitive fingers of the cholla cactus clutch the throat of something, but we never know what. But do we really have to know? You know.
Well, these particular little vignettes that ask the question, I think she's incorporating these sections in such a way to get you to imagine. It's an imaginative process. Who's running with me? Well, who's running with you? When you get outside on a sunny day, and whether you're walking or you're out for a jog or whatever, who's with you? Well, it may not be anybody that you can see, but as you're moving along, chances are you see a shadow that's moving with you. And you're running along with your own shadow.
Interesting. And she ends, in a way she ends as she began, with something celebratory. The first segment, keeping in mind, is spring, and the last one is another Spanish word, Spanish being a language that is commonly spoken today, as it was 100 years ago, and long before that, probably in northern New Mexico. Fiesta. The sun dances to the drums. Once again, you've got the cottonwood trees, she says, with cottonwood boughs on the head and ankles. And Jack and I talked about this image the other day, too, with having to do with the sun. What was that, Jack?
Right, shining through the trees. Imagine that you're looking up a slope, perhaps a low hill or something of that nature, but the sun is setting, the sun is behind the cottonwood tree, and what you see is the image of the sun perhaps framed by the boughs of the tree, and that the branches of the tree are on the head of the sun, if you will, and the bottom of the trunks are at the foot of the sun. No, so it frames this image of the sun being central, but the trees frame it, and produces this image of the sun dancing to the drums. Again, in New Mexico, we have several different pueblos. We have several different native clans, if you will, who celebrate seasonal celebrations, whether it's spring, winter, fall, what have you. They have set times in which they celebrate the harvest, for example. They'll have a harvest celebrations. They'll have a celebration at the spring equinox. They'll have celebrations for a lot of the change within the year. And again, you have Native American dancers who will perform in public in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And again, this harkens to that image of dancers dancing in a plaza, dancing in a celebration. The sun, again, being framed as one of the dancers.
And the moon steps and the stars run.
Right.
Everything moving everything animated there in the sky.
Right, very much, yes. Again, if the moon steps softly and a turquoise tablita, and the tablita is a headdress. Okay, it's a native headdress.
Oh, okay.
The stars run to pick up the eagle feathers dropped by the dancers. Eagle feathers are sacred to Native American tribes, especially in New Mexico, whether it's the Navajo or the Hopi or the Zuni. Eagles are sacred beings in their cosmology. And so they use the feathers in religious ceremonies. They use the feathers in when they gather together to commune in the kiva. So again, you have this image of eagle feathers having been dropped on the ground. And the stars run to pick up the eagle feathers, to take them back to the heavens, if you will.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, certainly would be accurate to call this a regional poem, but more accurately, simply, as we said at the beginning, grounded in the natural world, but there is certainly a spiritual element to it. It's a poem that written in English but incorporates some Spanish, you know.
Well, the thing about English is that it loves to steal words from other languages. So most English speakers will understand what fiesta means because they've run across it before. Pueblo, not so much, because Pueblo is pretty much endemic to the Southwest.
Yeah.
And back east, your eastern tribal units typically built, they were either nomadic structures in which they could carry with them, or they built more permanent structures such as longhouses made out of trees and birch bark and so on and so forth. Very few tribes used clay, and the way that the Pueblo cultures used adobe to build their structures. You see the Acoma Pueblo, what they call Sky City. It has adobe buildings. The mission, the church there, is made of adobe. That thing's been standing for well over 500 years.
Where is this?
The Acoma Pueblo. This is towards the north central corner of New Mexico.
Okay.
It's south, if I remember right, it's south of Albuquerque and Santa Fe, but it's more to the west. It's in and around the Aztec area.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, the Aztec Pueblo, the ruins there, again, you have structures, mostly pit dwellings. They dug down into the ground and they lined their dwellings with stone and rock, but their kiva, if I remember correctly, was an adobe structure. Not only was it dug into the ground, but it also had an adobe covering, if you will. But all this you can look up online. If you have questions, you can Google it. You can go to Google Maps or Apple Maps and pull up Aztec. You can pull up Acoma. You can pull up Mesa Verde. That's in Colorado, but still, it's part of the culture. It's still part of the cultures that existed here when the Spanish conquistadors moved through looking for the El Dorados that they were told about. native cultures trying to get these guys just to move along and leave them alone. And you can look up all the history to this. I think Miss Corbin this is one of her poems, just one. She spent a great deal of time in New Mexico. She wrote a lot of poems about this region, about northern New Mexico, about western New Mexico, and the images of the native people, and the images of the ranchers and the farmers and the people who came to live here. Pete, anything else to say?
Nothing else to add, Jack. I think we pretty much have covered it, but perhaps this podcast would lead people to look a little more closely into the poems of Alice Corbin. I believe she was born in the latter part of the 19th century, and,
right.
and she died in 1949 in northern New Mexico, I believe.
Yes. And again, I agree. Again, this is the idea of someone who came to New Mexico. They moved here. When they arrived, they were not New Mexican. They were not necessarily attuned to the culture. Very much like my own mother. My own mother came from Arkansas. When she arrived here, she was from Arkansas. When she died, she was no longer from Arkansas. She was a New Mexican. And I think Mrs. Corbin's poetry captures that transformation. And that's all I got.
Very good. And we hope you enjoy the podcast, and we look forward to bringing you another poem soon.
Thank you, Pete. This is Jack signing off for One Poem, courtesy of Lee County Pod.